Betty, I'm Stacy with Stacy's Organizing and Decorating for Life. I'm here to help you organize your thoughts and decorate your perspectives. Today our topic is does your it fit? And what we're going to talk about is disorders and healing, because that's what our its are called for. But before we get started, if you're coming back to this channel, I want to thank you once again for coming back to this channel. But I have to let those know that are new to this channel that I'm not a doctor, psychologist, psychiatrist, a scientist, any of those things. But what? You all know that as you listen to this weekly that I tell you that I love these things, and sometimes I may talk about what I learn from those things, how it's integrated into helping raise the vibe of this universe, because really that's what these videos are intended to do, is so that we can all feel inclusive rather than separate. What I am, since I'm not all of those things, is that I am a life coach, and I have a webpage called stacyforlife.com. On this webpage, I write a monthly blog, which I'll be writing a new one here within the next couple of days. But also there's a description of the services that I provide as a life coach dealing with addiction, codependency, and grief, but not exclusively to those things, because underneath those things lies a desire for healing and healthy relationships, as well as development of spiritual and soul consciousness. So it all is about going within and getting comfortable in our own skin. I work with people as young as 17 years old on up to 70 and above. I haven't had any above 70, but I'm open to it. So let's get started on our topic for today. Does your it fit? And then we talk about how we're going to, how the disorders are. The reason I had a ruler in the beginning of this video is because all these disorders have something in common, and oftentimes we try to separate and divide ourselves and rationalize and justify ourselves for our behaviors by comparing and such to the different behaviors. Like some of us may think our behaviors are to one level. What we often discover and realize that with a lot of people that I work with, dealing with the codependency and everything, is that people will take so much shit and then they explode. This is because we're also going to look at these rules versus the boundaries. Boundaries are not rules, but they might get confused with that. I'm not going to go through the list of all the disorders. You can see if your disorder fits in there. I'm just going to name a few, which are clinical anxiety, bipolar, and ADHD. Now, the things that these disorders, have in common that's, pretty much alive in many of the disorders is mood shifts, worry, fear. Most of the disorders require some amount of fear, which calls for this ruler, because out of fear, people try to make their environments of where they live and what they do to be able to be comfortable for them. But see, if the fear is on the inside and they perceive it outside, there's no amount of rules that you can do until you get into the healing. Then when you get into the healing, you can set boundaries. As I've said before, oftentimes when I work with people, unless they're in a physically abusive situation and they want to do the flight, fight, or freeze, we talk about that in the past few videos, that I don't usually encourage them to leave, because really, from my own experiences as well, is that I wish that I would have known how to set boundaries. That could have salvaged some of the relationships if I would have been more willing to look at me. I know that, some of these disorders some of these will fade. A lot of people get diagnosed with bipolar disorder when they're coming off of drugs, because we don't understand our moods and everything else, and getting these chemicals out of our systems does cause the mood shifts, and we may have mania, and we may be really down and depressed sometimes. And so a lot of these things, this is why I'm doing these videos like this, is to make us aware that any of our disorders can affect another person. And that really all of our disorders bumping against each other, like I said, unless it's a physically abusive situation, calls for us healing. Now, even the physically abusive situation calls for the healing, but you need to get the hell out. The reason I don't suggest to people to get the hell out or go into those other modes is because if they don't do the healing, oftentimes we keep attracting the same thing for our higher vibration and our higher healing. So, it's not looking at the other people. I know when I first got clean myself, I would be pissed off. I was pissed off a lot because I didn't know how to live clean. Probably that whole first year I was clean. I just went through the motions. I tried to do the right things. I tried to be good. I tried to behave. And trying to do all of that in itself, and I believe that people with disorders try to do those things. Sometimes they need medicine, sometimes they don't. And I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to tell you. We're not even going to touch on that. But sometimes people really do need medication to handle these different disorders, to bring peace in themselves and their souls, and just to get a balance so that they can start a healing process, because we have to calm down to be able to heal. For me to be able to heal, I had to get clean, because the same thinking, this is the problem, is we can't help ourselves with the same thinking that created this. And even when I did get clean that first year, when I say that I was pissed off, I would call my sponsor up and I would be bitching about my partner to my sponsor. And my sponsor would say to me, well, honey, she was from South Carolina. She would say to me, well, honey, what was your part in it? And I'd be like, didn't she just hear what I said? Because I was a victim here of this person. And, we don't want to do the victim villain. Does anybody want to be a victim or a villain watching this? If you do, then that's, that's you. And you're going to attract, stay in this cycle of victim villain. But I think that what we all desire to be is whole. I've always laughed when somebody said that a relationship completed them or what have you, or not always laughed, because there was a time when I thought that too, but I laugh now when somebody says that, because we really want to go into a relationship whole. So this is why we don't leave relationships that are unhealed to bounce into another relationship, because we aren't whole yet, because we haven't looked at those pains within ourselves and our souls, those pains that weigh down our souls, that are on top of our souls, that keep us from realizing our highest and best good. So speaking of the common threads between villains and victims would be your codependent and your narcissist. Many of their traits are interchangeable or the same, because both of them call for manipulation. You see, so the codependent has to learn how to use their voice to get what they want and need and desire. And the narcissist, well, they hopefully would need to do that too, because oftentimes their stuff is subtle. So what I'm saying is that a codependent, or a person who's in a codependent relationship, can do their own healing work. So it's not to say that it's a relationship. You may need a narcissist for you to realize your own codependence, is all that I'm saying. I'm not saying that these relationships will last forever, for you to be strong within yourself and not, kill yourself trying to please somebody in this relationship, because part of codependency is people pleasing. But at the same time, the narcissistic, trait, they like people pleasing too. It's really important about how things look on the outside to them. So all I'm saying is that we can't compare our traits to, delude and keep blaming other people. That I think that in this day and time where we had so many distractions prior, and we don't have as many distractions now, that it's calling for us to be able to do that. So I'm hoping that this video raises awareness of that. Now, we acknowledge when those disorders, so that we are enabled, so we can heal what's going on with us. So rather than playing that victim villain wheel and all of this and just bouncing from one relationship to the next, then we get into the healing and the healing techniques. And these are going to depend on your belief systems, and with different disorders. And, we talked about the rules and the boundaries, and now we're going to get into the belief system so you can start healing. Healing is feeling. The other day I was talking to somebody who's very dear to me, and they started crying and they apologized. And I explained that they're healing and peeling, because it's like peeling those layers of the onion. So it's about peeling those layers away, because some of us, some people have had hurt upon hurt upon hurt. And it's then when we get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and when we've had shit upon shit upon shit, we're fed up to hear. Because a lot of times what happens is the reason we don't know boundaries is, this was my experience, and I know that it's many others' experience. You just keep putting up with, because we second guess ourselves. That's the reason we keep putting up with it, because we haven't learned our own validation. So we don't know when to validate somebody else or when to not validate somebody else. So hence this manipulation game plays, So when we have all this on top of everything, it really creates a mud puddle of sorts, and it dries up, but then when it rains again, then there's, it's a mud puddle again. So we've got to sift through this, and in order to fill it in, or either pull that stuff up off of our soul. So we look at the things in the past when we're working with people. We sit and we chat, and it's like looking at things. And some people have a strong belief in God, a higher power, someone else who they can rely on, who can give them strength and empower themselves. Because when we go in these situations, we're either feeling too empowered or not enough empowered, and so, but to empower ourselves and be genuinely authentic, I think, is our desire in this life. I believe it was mine, and that's my desire, is to help people do that for themselves too, having learned how to. So we talk about the belief systems. Oftentimes people, like I said, they have a strong faith in something, and they feel like they're praying and praying. But you see, we can't solve a problem with the same thinking, the same words that created the problem. And if we're still talking and praying, and God is consciousness, whatever faith you belong to, it's a consciousness. So that consciousness lives and breathes inside of us. So sometimes we confuse that consciousness with our own mind, right? So oftentimes people are confused because they haven't expanded. So healing calls for an expansion, and that's what empowerment does, is it allows us to expand. When we're in those fears of all these different disorders and making up these rules for our lives, but it doesn't feel good, and then we feel bad for making up rules. And oftentimes I've seen people then be generous after they made up these rigid rules, and then they turn around and be generous. So there's no clear boundaries set, because the healing hasn't taken place and one hasn't learned how to validate themselves. So when we look at the healing practices and techniques, when I'm talking with people and they say, oh yeah, I prayed, but they're praying for the same thing and they're not really listening, the meditation, because oftentimes when people get in fear, remember we talked about the breathing and digestive last week. A lot of times people reach for something else, even if it's a cigarette. That's going to affect your respiratory system when you get nervous and everything else. And then if grab a cigarette, we think that that's calming us down, but really we can have a calm within ourselves, cells, and soul, remember? So, and then our eating. Oftentimes people grab for something to eat when they feel stressed out. So it's, what do you do when you feel stressed out? And I'm not saying to grab for anything, and I'm not saying not to grab for anything, but for me, I don't want to have the health problems from grabbing food when I get stressed out, and I don't want to have the respiratory problems from smoking. So then what do? You take a look at your belief systems, because apparently if you're praying and it's just not producing results. What another lady told me another time in recovery is, I was struggling, single mom, and I was, telling her my tales of woes, and I was a victim of everything. And so I was explaining this to her, and she said, so how's your relationship with God? And I was like, because I went to church. I ushered in the church. I went to a really cool church. I got to learn a lot of things about a lot of different faiths in that church, and I looked at her and I was like, my relationship with God's just fine. And she told me that was arrogant. And I was like, arrogant? I'm struggling here and she's telling me I'm arrogant. So I really didn't understand what that meant. But what that meant was I was unteachable at the time, because I can't expand my belief systems if I'm unteachable. If I have a problem for every solution, which was a way long ago I used to be, but I learned through recovery that there is a solution to these things. And so being able to be open-minded. So we have to look at our belief systems and to be open-minded and to realize that we can expand, whether you're, Christian, Buddhist, Taoist, whatever, faith that you are. We can always expand our belief system. We can up our practices. We can learn more and more. So say if I'm working with somebody who believes and has a strong faith in God, we're going to start with prayer. So we pray. And I pray with them, and it does help. They seem to feel like it expands their mind because I had to learn the language myself. I had to learn to speak and communicate better and broader. And prayer is a communication. It's not just something that we just do. It's a communication. It's a communication with our higher power. And I do believe that our higher power does live in our consciousness, and I believe our consciousness lives in our souls. So anything that I'm experiencing or that I'm learning is also being processed through my higher power if I choose to acknowledge that and expand in that direction. It's not just my higher power is not just something that's way out here. My higher power lives and breathes in everything in and through me, because I can't control my breath or anything like that. I can control my breath to a degree with meditation, but whether I'm going to breathe or not, that's just my life force. And so if I'm breathing, I have a purpose here, and so do you. And so you don't have to go through all these pains over and over again to where you're feeling like you're worthless, because you do have a purpose. I know that we get sick and tired of being sick and tired. So we go through the prayer, we do the prayer, and then we sit still in meditation. We learn how to start appreciating our breathing in meditation. Oftentimes people don't know how to meditate, and we have the monkey mind in meditation, so we'll just sit and get still. We start the breathing. And, when I taught martial arts, we used to give the kids 10 counts in their breathing to calm down, because we can calm down. And we learned that if we calm down, and take those 10 counts, that there is a calm on us, and then we can seek solutions. You see, we're not dependent on something way outside of here to just make things happen, which something does make things happen, but why don't we want an intimate relationship with our higher power? See, it's not as intimate if you think that it's way out there. It's in your soul. So to have an intimate relationship with that higher power, it's about that inner dialogue that I talked about before. And I too have had hissy fits and everything where I didn't talk very well to myself. I told somebody the other day, you're just not being very nice to yourself, just like was told to me when I had a negative dialogue going on about myself, to myself, with things that I made up. Last week's video was talking about the things that we made up. Well, I had to know how to make things up, and I had to learn how to shift that creativity from the negative to the positive. So then sometimes when people aren't really certain about their relationship with their higher powers, or what their higher power is supposed to be like. Say, if they've had a higher power imposed on them, say, and they're young people and they don't know what their higher power wants to look like. Well, we do tapping, and tapping looks like this. What prayer looks like, it's your intimate relationship, your intimate talking with your higher power. And maybe at the end of this video, we'll do a little prayer, meditation, tapping, and chanting. And I'm going to go on the tapping right now. So I'm going to hit that because most people are pretty familiar with prayer and meditation, but tapping. So I've kind of done it before, but tapping is when you're feeling anxiety or stress or what have you, and you start off, I'm feeling a bunch of fear about this situation. I don't know why I'm feeling so much fear about this situation. Maybe I'm feeling insecure. I don't know why I'm feeling insecure, because there's a part of me that says, no, I'm not insecure. And I don't know why I don't have this balance. I really wish I knew why I don't have the balance. I really would desire to be able to have the balance. I know I could have the balance. There's times when I have the balance. But really, at these times, I'm so scared. There's so much going on. There's so much uncertainty in the world. I wish that I had some control. I wish I really did have some control over what was going on in the world. I wish I had control over this person too, because they get on my nerves. They get on my nerves because it makes me feel this way. And it makes me feel this way because then what if this happens? And then if this happens, then it's really going to mess me up. But really, I don't know if that's going to happen or not, so I really could calm down. And I think that I just don't know. I just really can't stop thinking about that. But I could stop thinking about that if I wanted to stop thinking about that. And then we come to the solution in the end. And the solution is I just need to be still and be quiet for right now. Maybe just to be all that solution is. But do you get what I'm saying? It's not necessarily those words, but it's that process. And there's other videos on tapping that you can do. But what it does is when somebody's stressed out or not knowing or they have a bad inner dialogue, we can, if it's tapping it in, it taps in a better inner dialogue because I work on that with people. Okay? So then the chanting is something I myself am just learning. I touched on it last week. How I started feeling comfortable with my chanting is that my life coach had recommended chanting and yelling and all of this to get this frustration out. Now, I did do the tapping and stuff, and I have written, but the chanting, I watched Tina Turner and her story. And so she started chanting the Namaringe Kyo and Maharinge Kyo. Anyway, you have to look it up too. But it's Namaringe Yo Kyo. Namaringe. I can't do it because I'm trying to do it slow in front of y'all. But anyway, you can look the video up. I'll put it in the description below. And that kind of chanting. And I've liked chanting because I've sat in kirtans and things like this where we did the chanting and stuff. And it's a release of energy, you know, and it gets joy-filled energy. And I don't believe that we have to know particular words to be able to express joy, you know, and to express excitement and energy, because all of these things, when we're not healed, that comes out as energy when we haven't worked on our healing. And that's why we keep attracting the same things, is because it's about the energy that we give off. And then when we work on our healing, we attract different things. We attract expansion and experiences. I'm not a Hindu, but I'll set in the Sanskrit things. I don't title myself anything. That's why we try to dispel these labels and just call it disorders, because we all have an it, right? So does your it fit with someone else's fit? It may fit for a while for your right and divine healing, and then it might be time to move on, or it might be time to be in acceptance that, you know, that what I can do about myself that I can't do about somebody else. So it's just about not judging our fellows, you know, especially in these hard times like this, you know, is that we all have an it. You know, I have addiction as my it, and I also had codependency as my it, and we're all going to grieve. So in these uncertain times, in my tapping and in my chanting and in the Reiki that I do, I send out these prayers. I send out these prayers for people who are struggling with this adapting to the new way that life is now versus the way that it was. You know, it's how we're going to use our energy. I send out, you know, I meditate on these things too. I do the, you know, the Reiki in the healing meditations. And then the tapping, you know, like I said, I work with people. So let's take a minute to get centered and see what this looks like, and learning to use our words to the instances, not just the words that we learned, because to expand, we have to relearn some different things. It doesn't mean that what we learned was bad or we have to label it or anything. It just means that we're going to expand and evolve. So get quiet. Take those deep breaths. Sometimes we say God. Sometimes we say Father, Mother, God. Some people say Jehovah. Some people say Krishna. But whatever yours is, just sit in that. Just sit in your God and let that light shine on you, because whatever your God is light. Take a deep breath in and let it out. God is hope. Take a deep breath in and let it out. And know that as this world is uncertain at this time, that we are metaphorically cleaning out our closets. And we have a big mess laying on the floor. So breathe, keep breathing. And we've had big messes on the floor before. Maybe not like this in our life, but we've had it. But we know deep in ourselves and in ourselves and our souls that there's this consciousness that allows us to continue breathing and being open to adjusting and adapting to whatever we're supposed to evolve into at this time. We know that the old systems needed some improvement. We may not like the way that it came about, but it came about and there's no change in that. So all we can do is change ourselves and evolve ourselves. So as we breathe in, think about whatever it is that you would like to change into. What is it that you've wanted to do? And maybe that's open now for you to do. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's time for you to pray for creativity. You know, I think many of us are praying for creativity at this time. I myself am praying for creativity just to expand, because I've gotten used to expanding and it's kind of exciting. So it is my prayer for you that you get excited about expanding and learning something new. You know, we're very fortunate that in this day and time we can sit in front of these computers and learn something new. That we can heal ourselves, selves, and souls by being more conscious and aware, and knowing that there is a higher power, there's an existence in us, a life force in us that keeps us living, eating, and breathing, and we can choose the way and how we're going to do that to make our life more, valuable, more, have more quality. So I hope that this video has been helpful. And I want to thank you so much for your time, as always, because your time is valuable and you are valuable. So think about your it and how you can heal your it. So then you'll know if your it fits. But if it's working with somebody right now and it's not working, even that is something to give you to work on. That means that, your it has fit for whatever reason, and it's just time to look within or to get somebody to help you work on that, okay? All right, I wish you much love and peace, and I look forward to connecting with you again next week. All right, thank you so much. Bye.